Chapter 17 of The Alps, the Danube, and the Near East. This Librivox recording is in the public domain. Read by Betty B. The Country of the Magyars. Czechoslovakia is a land of the peasant, whose greatest men have sprung from the soil and whose people believe in democracy. Austria is gradually growing accustomed to democratic ideas, but Hungary is a land of the aristocrat where the nobility still rules. What is left of Hungary's portion of the old empire is now ruled by a regent, but 95% of the people, I am told, want to live under a king. The Hungarians believe their country was not as well treated by the powers as was Germany when peace was patched up. The Germans lost about 10% of their people and a comparatively small fraction of their territory. Hungary lost 68% of her territory and almost two-thirds of her people. I have talked with the highest officials and with Hungarians of all classes, but I have yet to find one who is satisfied with the Treaty of Trianon. In that treaty, the powers divided the country, giving generous slices of it to Romania, Yugoslavia, and Czechoslovakia. Just now the land is quiet and the people are doing as well as they can under the conditions forced upon them, for Czechoslovakia, Romania, and Yugoslavia have erected tariff walls along their Hungarian boundaries, making trade with them difficult, and have placed many restrictions on the Hungarians still living in the ceded territories. It is claimed that the Hungarians were the intelligentsia of those countries. They did most of the business, and international trade was almost entirely in their hands. Under the present conditions, it is difficult for the Magyars to re-establish their former connections, and commerce and industry are suffering. Yet I believe that given a fair chance, Hungary will quickly get back on her feet and be one of the enterprising and progressive nations of Central Europe. The government is already planning many public improvements. Budapest has a new scheme for extending the city along modern lines, and land and educational reforms are planned. Hitherto, the Magyars have been held back by the Austrians. They are now independent and will advance rapidly. I hear many complaints against the government, which rules the people with an iron hand, but a member of the nobility, who is one of the strong men of his country and wants a monarchy, said to me the other day, "We need that kind of government. We are not easily ruled. You remember what someone has said of your immigrants. When the German comes to America, he buckles down to work and forges ahead. When the Irishman comes, he jumps into politics and joins the police. But when the Hungarian comes, he starts factions among his own people and is ready to fight. Here everyone wants to rule, and we need an autocrat to keep us in order." I find it difficult to give a clear-cut picture of the situation here in the valley of the Danube. The old Hungary was one of the richest areas on the continent of Europe. It consisted of a great rolling plain, bounded on the northeast and southeast by the Drave and Danube rivers. It extended eastward to the sea at Fiume, so that it had access through the Mediterranean to the Atlantic Ocean. The country formed a geographic and economic unit which could have been walled in and yet would have remained self-sustaining. There were vast forests, wheat lands, and vineyards. There were minerals, including the coal and iron needed for industry. The country was well supplied with waterways, and the railroads formed a network connecting with the trunk lines to all the great markets. The former kingdom contained 125,000 square miles. It was more than 3 times the size of Ohio and larger than Great Britain and Ireland, and it supported 20 millions of people. When the powers came to consider it, they found it was inhabited by a half-dozen different races, and they proceeded to cut off a slice here and a bit there on the basis of racial divisions. They wanted to clip the wings of the Magyars and to form new republics and kingdoms that would be more easily controlled in the future. Altogether, they took away more than two-thirds of the original territory, leaving the shrunken Hungary of today. What remains is not much larger than South Carolina. It contains a population of 8 million, most of whom are Magyars, the proudest, the most spirited, and in some respects, the most progressive people of Central Europe. What the powers have done makes me think of the remark of John Pierpont Morgan, the elder, when he was told that the Steel Trust must be dissolved and put back into the old companies of which it was made. He replied, "You can't do it, gentlemen. How can you unscramble eggs?" I am reminded too of the farm boy who was asked if he could play the violin. He replied, "I guess so. I never tried it, but it looks easy." The powers around the conference table evidently thought they could unscramble the eggs in the geographic and commercial entity that was Hungary until 1919. Count Telecki, the statesman geographer, who is one of the best economic thinkers of Central Europe, has told me, for instance, how the treaty makers disarranged the whole water system of the Danube. That river is much like the Mississippi in that its floods have to be controlled and vast sums must be expended annually to keep the waters in order. Before the war, most of the system of flood control was under the Hungarian kingdom. Hungary began the work of reclamation more than 100 years ago and built enough dikes 20 feet high along the Danube and the Tisza to line both sides of the Mississippi from Canada to the Gulf of Mexico. The total length of those dikes is 4,000 miles. Furthermore, the government has dug 8,000 miles of canals. It has protected from floods a tract of land as large as West Virginia and reclaimed from the swamps more than 15 million acres. All the reclaimed lands of Holland are only a little more than 1/3 as extensive as the areas that were reclaimed by Hungary. This flood prevention system had hundreds of rain gauges and water gauges along the courses of the river far up in the mountains. There were 1,600 observation and alarm stations equipped with telephones. The government issued daily reports of the water levels, and there were about 80 cooperative companies keeping the locks and the dikes in repair. When the treaty was made, the system of water control was cut to pieces. A triple management was established so that Hungary has now to rely upon Czechoslovakia and Romania to help her keep back the water. She can no longer control the forests that conserve her water supply, and an area of something like 6 million acres is in constant danger of floods. Large tracts are also likely to suffer from drought for lack of the former unified control of the river waters. If a satisfactory joint water control could be established, it is estimated that a wheat crop worth about $40 million a year could be raised on irrigated land. In unscrambling the eggs, the powers chopped off the railways as far as through service is concerned. The country was covered with lines reaching to all the great markets. Now a ride of a few hours in any direction brings one to a new frontier, where a foreign customs house holds up the traffic. Farm labor conditions were badly disorganized through the partition of Hungary. The valley of the Danube is much like that of the Mississippi. It is one of the richest farming tracts on the globe, and there is a succession of harvesting seasons as one goes from the Black Sea to Vienna. In the United States, we have an army of harvesters who start in Texas and Oklahoma and work their way north to the Dakotas as the summer matures. Until the World War, it was the same in the valley of the Danube, but now the harvesters are stopped at the frontiers of each country, and the laborers are unable to follow the crop unless they get passports. Moreover, racial feeling is so strong that it might be unhealthy for the Romanian or Czech to work on the Hungarian plain. End of chapter 17.